Thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you to everyone who participated in one of the focus groups or the steering committee. It's been a, speaking of, she's on her way. It's been a really interesting week. Like, I got to hear some really good input from a lot of people. There was a lot of really good discussion. I don't think anything was surprising to anyone through the conversations as to what thoughts are about Main Street Waterloo or downtown in general. But it was great to hear, it was interesting, I should say, to hear how different groups and different people view like what downtown is. So Ben Muldrow is here. He's here as part of a program with Main Street Iowa to help us put together this downtown branding and a kind of a new look for Main Street Waterloo as the organization who is helping downtown Waterloo along. So he is worked his tail off for the past couple of days, and I got to just hide and get some work done. And he's took out all the information he gathered from you guys and has some cool stuff to show us. I'm really excited.
Awesome.
Anything else? Or do you want
I think that's good. Let's jump right in.
Do you want everyone to introduce themselves or no?
I think I remember everybody from the focus groups, and the two that I hadn't met yet, I want to introduce myself. So
Okay.
I think we're good to go.
All right, don't fall asleep.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll take that challenge of keeping you awake in the dark. First of all, I want to thank everybody for participating over the course of the past 3 days. Thank Jessica for everything in putting this together. And, of course, give credit to Main Street Iowa for helping to provide this branding technical service to the Main Street program. A lot of stuff to share with you today. I'll try my best to just be very open and blunt with everything that I hear and everything that I see and everything that I think. A lot of times we find that communities overthink things. They make it more complicated than they need to, and they kind of design themselves into corners that they can't figure out how to get out of. So I'm going to try to show you some of the ideas of creating a system that allows you to really make all your resources work together and build true brand equity for the community. We had really, really good, what I felt like was honest input throughout the process. We understand that there's a negativity as it involves downtown. There are perception issues, there are image issues. There's this idea that downtown isn't safe. We have people locally that do not come downtown, and it has truly left their consideration set. You know, they don't even think about downtown as an option for particular things. We also have people that participate in events downtown, have great experiences with those events, but that doesn't necessarily convert over into downtown improving. It's just all within the confines of that event. Like, I literally had somebody that I talked to that I kind of came across along the way who was talking about how amazing Friday Lou was, and at the same time talking about how nothing ever happened downtown. So it's like, I'm confused. Like, which one is it? So it's just a lot kind of going on there. One of the places I always like to start is I like to look at some of the things that already exist. I'm sure you're all familiar with everything that we're seeing here. We've got the city logo. We've got the new unrolled brand from what used to be Travel Waterloo, now Experience Waterloo. That was introduced in September of last year. We have the River Loop logo, which was very interesting because it's not actually the River Loop logo. It's the River Loop Amphitheater logo, which is also co-opted for the River Loop Rhythms logo. And there's a couple other presences of River Loop in the community. There seems to be an old River Loop logo that's just the orange circle with the wave through it. I think that's right. Which also appears on top of the public market building. That's not a public market, right? So we've got a lot of that going on. You can see it's kind of interesting. The Waterloo Community Foundation seems to use a lot of the exact same colors that River Loop logo uses. As I was talking with Tavis yesterday, I was like, hey, just want to let you know, chances are I'm going to be using some of the same colors that you are because you decided to use all the colors. So the new Experience brand very much takes advantage of a full spectrum of colors. So that's an easy one to coordinate. The city did a pretty good job of using every color they could think of as well. So the thing that you see often is you see a multitude of colors. So it is kind of interesting that one of the first things that sticks out is the Main Street Water logo. Main Street Waterloo logo literally is one of the only ones that was this two-color logo system. We heard a lot of complaints that it looked maybe like it was favoring one educational institution in state, or don't want to ever walk too far down that road. So there was a lot there where it was just like, hey, this is a hard identity for us to use. It's hard to work with. We're forced to kind of have a black background or a dark background. So that doesn't always work for us. The other thing, just from a design standpoint, is from a design emphasis, there's this kind of color highlight on the letter S, which really is not important to the overall identity of things. You would think you're either highlighting Main Street or you're highlighting Waterloo, but you're never just going to highlight street, right? But in digging in, I even found, I thought this was pretty cool. This is an old city logo. Have you ever seen this, Wendy? And
It's Waterloo, Illinois.
do what?
It's Waterloo, Illinois, isn't it? Waterloo.
Is it?
Didn't catch that when you showed me earlier.
Oh, well, dang. Oh,
That's why
well.
you
Cool.
seen it.
Cool.
It's like, I didn't know what the chicken was, but I'm sure there would have been a cool story. I didn't, so, oh well, you never know what you're going to, is it? It is, look at that. Well, okay, disregard that slide. But, even in doing this, there are still remnants out there of the old Main Street Waterloo. Heck, for all I know, that might not be your old logo. That's what, okay, it is good.
Yeah.
It's not Main Street Waterloo, Illinois' logo. So, yeah, I know, I found Ontario a bunch as well. So obviously the current logo is better than the old logo was. I can see why there was a desire to upgrade and move forward, but I think we've got some recommendations that'll kind of continue to move that. So the next thing that we really want to do is we want to dig into the values and kind of the components that build up this brand system. I think a lot of times people jump right into this idea of it's all about what does the logo look like, and we really think, especially from a Main Street perspective, being able to have defined components that allow you to build expandability and connectivity in your message is important. One of the biggest things that we want to introduce is an idea that the Main Street organization here had adopted and understood but hadn't fully rolled out, is this understanding that you really are the steward of two different brand identities simultaneously. You are the steward of your organization brand, and that is Main Street Waterloo, but you are also the steward of downtown Waterloo. That's the destination that you're promoting. Every community that we go into that has a Main Street organization and lacks a Main Street, ask the question, this is confusing, why do we do it this way? So from an organizational standpoint, being able to talk about how the Main Street organization is connected to a statewide and national network that it focuses in on revitalizing and bringing vibrancy to districts throughout the country, that's a really good message to be able to convey, but also understanding that the destination that we're promoting is very solidly downtown. And people might have argued where downtown starts and stops. They might have argued what components are inside or not inside downtown. But the thing that no one argued was that it was clearly downtown. That's what people call it. And that's the identity that we need to build that value into. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So then from there, we wanted to go ahead and land on a color palette, knowing that we had a pretty broad spectrum to pick from. We wanted to land on a slightly smaller color palette than a full rainbow. So what we did is we selected 5 colors. These are colors that are being pulled from things that a lot of other entities are already using. In fact, if you look at these colors, you're probably going to already see them replicated in things like signage that's already up, banners that are already up, and some of those other pre-existing identities. The reason that we do that is those things already are there. those things are going to be replicated in the environment. So it makes sense for us to be able to kind of wrap our arms around those and use those to tell our story. But part of the reason that we selected a smaller spectrum of those colors was that it will help us to separate our messaging from some of the things that are happening on that larger community level. Because Experience Waterloo has such a broader spectrum, the look and feel of their things is going to have a certain feeling to it with that rainbow spectrum. So by having that smaller area, we're able to complement but still kind of own those colors. One of the big departures is a primary deep rich color that Experience is using is a deep dark purple. We decided to land on a deep dark blue as ours so that we know that there's this kind of design separation that's happening. The next thing that we started to look at was typeface, and typeface can be really fun. Waterloo is a unique name because it ends in double O's. That's an odd dynamic for a community to have. We selected two different sans serif typefaces, a primary and a secondary. The primary looks a little funny, but I'll show you why we selected it in just a second. We wanted to be able to create a word type for the name Waterloo so that when you see Waterloo, you automatically know that it's yours. You know that it's custom. And we wanted to be able to position a word type around Waterloo that allowed the business community to easily access that, create merchandise that people might be interested in, and just create that connectivity to the name itself. We get overly deep into the idea of what's our graphic, and we don't think enough about the connected nature of our name. That is the thing that we all share. All the organizations that are making the community better, they all share Waterloo as the thing that they're trying to improve. And then on that secondary typeface, we just selected a nice bold sans serif that went well with it. Now, when you look at what the name looks like in that typeface, it looks like this. So, got some pretty interesting features to it. I selected a stylized A that does not have the crossbar. If you're a former English teacher, that might really get underneath your skin. But again, those are the little features that allow us to have this word type that can be uniquely ours. You also see kind of the river flow of the leg of the L and this kind of bringing in that double O. It allows you to make something that maybe feels a little spacey typically because of the space that happens around an O. It makes it a little bit tighter. It makes it something that you can own. And when you cluster all that together, you introduce the colors, you introduce the typeface, you start to get a look and feel that looks kind of like this. Bright, vibrant, a lot of activity. One of the things that I landed on when we started to look at this idea of downtown Waterloo, you have 4 O's in that name, which is kind of interesting. When you dissect the way that Experience Waterloo is created, those colors are created by a series of intersecting and overlapping circles. So it gives us this opportunity to, again, connect from a strategy standpoint without hedging into a look and feel. So when you start to look at how this system can work, you have these different color opportunities, you have these different color options. You can actually fill those O's with color to be able to create that different variation, but it still works very, very well in one color. You start to see some of the texture that you can bring into this. Now, one of the big things that we talked about was the use of the word "loo." I want to make a decree today. I really love the use of it. I think that because it is a unique part of your name, you've done a great job of using it, especially from an event standpoint. I think that you can have permission to not feel like it's a contraction. I don't think that you have to put an apostrophe before it. You've been very diligent in doing that, but it just kind of comes off as clunky sometimes. And if you really want to own it, I think it's okay for you to kind of declare it as an identity. And I will say, thank goodness you guys have an urban market, and One of the biggest battles in my industry is farmers market. Is it farmers S apostrophe, farmer apostrophe S? And I have decided over time that there is no apostrophe and that farmers is simply an adjective instead of an ownership. And that's the way that I kind of landed on it. With Lou, I think it's the same way. Being able to kind of have it be a little bit more streamlined, being able to have that slang built into it so it gives you some additional use to it. But now all of a sudden it allows you to truly own that kind of slang because it's in that word type and it's uniquely yours. Now, one of the things that's really exciting about this, and there was a lot of talk about districting. What are the districts that make up the downtown? Um, I will tell you that I firmly believe that overemphasizing the districts is a bad strategy for you guys. There are not naturally occurring identities in the downtown. There's a natural separation formed by the river that causes east and west. But one of the things that I would say to you is, from an experience standpoint, you would be better served by highlighting Fourth Ave as a connection than you would by highlighting east and west through districting. But we do know that there are identities. There are these sub-identities that exist within it. So like TechWorks is a sub-identity, and this simply shows how by using your typeface to acknowledge TechWorks, it allows you to visually wrap your arms around it. It doesn't mean that TechWorks has to change their logo, but it means that as you talk about the things that make you up, you can use that to kind of wrap your arms around it. Same thing with Riverloop. What is Riverloop? Riverloop is seen in so many different ways. Technically, it's a connective bike trail from, managed by Leisure Services. It's also a plaza. It's also an amphitheater. It's a multitude of different things. So being able to use that typeface to, again, wrap your arms around some of your own amenities. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so then from there, you start to look at the organization itself. And again, we're looking at a series of colors and typeface, but also always leaning on the side of simplicity. We're leaning on the side of simplicity because your product is complex. You've got a lot of space, you've got a lot of roads, you've got a lot of different districts, you've got a lot of different things going on. And you have a lot of big projects that are also in the pipe. And one of the things that does concern me, if you go through and you look at all of the different iterations of things, there's been a lot of big project mentality and not necessarily the focus on making sure that the big project has created the catalyst investment that's actually creating growth and kind of connectivity from big project to big project. So being able to use this system to really help that identity pass all the way through. One of the things that struck me was the banners that you see along Expo Plaza and leading up into the Riverloop Amphitheater. All they are is solid color. And it is the place where all of those colors come together. You can imagine what it would look like if you continued some of those solid color banners out in single colors along different connected nodes and kind of symbolize that this is the place where things come together. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do, and I'll show you some more on that in just a second. But I do want to hit on the organization. So with the organization logo, we've got this identity, Main Street Waterloo. People might or might not know what it is. We've heard pretty loud and clear that inside the downtown, awareness seems to be pretty good and perception seems to be pretty positive. But being able to highlight this organization, what they do, and how people can get involved. So we just take all those concepts and kind of bring it back in together. I love having a simplified logo that helps us to tell the 4-point approach story of the Main Street model. I love having these 4 signature colors that allow us to tie in to those 4 committees and that general approach to what we're doing. A phrase that you all have been using locally that I absolutely love is powered by Main Street. We overemphasize our own brand from an organizational standpoint sometimes because we're trying to get credit. And what we end up doing is we end up diluting the connectivity between the positive experiences. So that idea of being able to just place this powered by Main Street, that goes a long way. Now, I do want to set the tone for a conversation that we heard a little bit about, and that is a discussion that there might be the introduction of a special service district. And that district would overlap the Main Street district, and it would assess a fee that would go in to help do programming and do enhancements throughout the district. It's a self-imposed tax, I guess is the best way to say it. You can imagine the positivity that comes with self-imposed taxes. People love that. Just kidding. So, understanding that there might be this governmental mechanism that is put into play to help enhance funding for the downtown, you want to be really mindful of how that mechanism comes to light. Oftentimes, that mechanism has to have a board that governs itself. Sometimes they can just simply deem the board of a pre-existing organization as the kind of the stewardship board for the funding mechanism. But in Wisconsin, they have BIDs, business improvement districts. And what we do oftentimes is we do just a very simplified icon that says funded by bid. The big thing that you need property owners and business owners to understand is how that fee is being used. So as we move forward, and I've already talked with Jess a little bit about this, as we move forward, if that's something that comes up, we'll just get back together and I'll create something that kind of helps. But I think a lot of times we go overboard on over organizing or, trying to make it feel like a separate thing. We just need to be very, very succinct with, hey, you remember those taxes you paid? We're using them here. And isn't that a great investment? So as you start to go through this, you start to see that this organization brand and destination brand system is starting to emerge. Some of the expansion collateral, being able to see how it might look as it makes its way to business cards, again, having that organization on kind of the business side and then showing that destination that you promote. As I walked around the office, one of the things that I noticed is your room signs. Every room has a little sign, so I went ahead and designed what an enhanced look could look like for that. Vacancy treatments, being able to highlight available properties in the district and be able to kind of connect the idea of you serving this kind of economic development arm in the district as well. Wanted to show how the brand might make its way over into the Facebook page. Again, this is a tricky one sometimes because people don't necessarily know what voice this should be coming from. I truly believe that when people decide to like the organization, what they're saying is, I want to know about what's going on downtown. So I'm showing that the primary brand that they're seeing and hearing from is downtown as a voice, if that makes sense. And then just for Wendy's sake, I wanted to show a very easy way that as a stopgap solution, if the city wanted to do kind of a quick freshen up without really going through a rebrand, they could simply simplify down the seal, but they could still couple with the word type. I don't want you to feel like this word type has to be restricted only to the Main Street organization or only to the downtown district. It could be the type thing that gets used in other places. And through the use of colors and through the kind of preservation of the seal element, you are able to work those together. So I'm not really suggesting, I'm just using it as an example to show how that word type can make its way into other things, and that's okay. Then from there, we start to look at brand extension. Brand extension is pretty fun. This is where these brand elements make their way into the events that Main Street puts on. And what I try to illustrate here is I try to illustrate a variety of levels of adaptation and adoption. So the first one, we start to kind of ease into it. On the left-hand side, you see the current Taste of Lou logo. And then on the right-hand side, you can keep the essence of the logo the same, but you can start to adopt some of those elements and truly start to make it your own. Friday Lou, again, taking those different elements and starting to factor them in to that system. And what I wanted to do here was, I know that this is a really popular event. You guys teamed up and created a joint concert poster. And on that joint concert poster, it denotes what's happening on the River Loop Rhythms and what's happening for Friday Lou. I designed this to have this kind of simplified icon. I think this has become such a big event that being able to have that kind of simple icon to denote it's yours might be something that's fun to use down the road. Downtown Trick or Treat logo, guess what? It's got to have a pumpkin on it, right? So, just simply adopting typeface, but this is one of the first times where I'm showing a departure from that more rigid to typeface system. It is okay to introduce more when they're appropriate for the topic. We try to have pretty rigid standards because typefaces are kind of like children. It's really easy to have too many. And the moment that you do, things really start to stink. So, being able to have that kind of ability to integrate the continuity but still preserve the individuality of the event. This next one is kind of an interesting one. This is the Waterloo Days. Okay, Waterloo Days logo, which when we say logo, what we mean is that script. That script has been around for a very, very long time. You all have used it consistently year over year, but you've changed the look and feel based off of the theme for the year. Just because you adopt a brand system does not mean that you have to depart from that long-standing design tradition. In fact, I would say that you have created a visual following behind it, and that continuity does you a justice. So abandoning it wouldn't make sense. But being able to go through and be very mindful of making sure that that year-to-year adaptation is truly paying tribute to the theme of the year, but it's still preserving a design standard that you want to kind of hold. So I'm showing at the top how you can cluster the script with a typeface that's appropriate for the theme. And then I'm still bringing in that kind of reoccurring circle into the guitar pick version of the logo for the year. So does that make sense? Winter Waterloo. Again, this is, there's certain things that you see repeated over and over again. Like I say, you guys did an amazing job. Every time you used Lou, it had an apostrophe. But I think that, because of the way that L and O cluster, it makes it okay for that not to be there. But you can start to see how that imagery pairs with some of your photos, and it really seems to create that connectivity between the organization, the district, and the event. Restaurant Week, again, what's really nice about this is once you have this system in play, the ability to create these adaptations becomes very, very simple. And that's a testament to the fact that all of this stuff has been designed since yesterday. So it shows you the efficiency that the organization can have by adopting this foundation. But it still gives you the leeway to have a little bit of fun. Barbecue Lou and Blues too. Believe it or not, a barbecue logo does not have to have a pig in it. I know I've done this a long time. I've created my fair share of pig logos out there. I will tell you that the old Barbecue Lou logo definitely deserves points for figuring out how to spell Lou in the tail of the pig. Okay? But it's also absolutely okay for you to be able to kind of retire things at times. We had a Parks and Rec logo in the city that I live in that very clearly was designed in the 70s, and in every way, shape, and form, you could tell exactly when it was designed. And a new Parks and Director came in, wanted to redesign the logo, but he was like, it's been around a long time. There's a lot of emotion to it. So what he actually did was he had a 70s themed retirement party. And he invited past employees in, and it was just a really good time. And then at the end of the party, he unveiled the new brand for Parks and Rec. So, being able to understand that there's always emotion, especially when you have event organizers and volunteers. They kind of get connected to something, and it is difficult at times for them to understand that the logo of an event does actually play into the overall district brand. So being able to have kind of some logic there. I didn't want to leave the pigs out, so this could kind of show how the brand can make its way into merchandise and things like that. Some very simple, expansion things like Mayor's Fireworks, being able to make sure that through that typeface it all kind of connects in. Got this really interesting event called Tour de Lou, which again, it gives you that opportunity to highlight all the changes that have happened downtown year after year. It's really great images that you can see when you look this up downtown. But what you start to see is now you have this it's a series, these events now seem to be coming from a common place. And it's not as much about Main Street getting the credit for the events they put on as it is downtown getting the credit for being a vibrant place. Does that make sense? Now, I didn't play around with the market logo simply because I really like it. But the adaptations or adoptions of some of the typefaces would be one of the simplest ways to do it if you guys were interested. So that's up to you, completely up to you. I'll be more than happy to do it if you want me to. So, but like I say, I like the look and feel. I think the colors are kind of complementary. Then from there, I always like to show how it makes its way into some of the marketing components. We've got, is Pride coming up in August?
In August.
So, I wanted to be able to show this. This is what happens when you go through and you kind of convert that smaller palette into the full rainbow. And you can see that kind of looks and feels a little bit different, but is appropriate for events like Pride. Merchandise that people would want to buy. Most of the time, when you go into a community, typically the only merchandise that somebody might have for their community is what we call car wash t-shirts. They're the ones with 7,000 logos on the back, and they're so ugly you only wear them when you cut the grass or paint things. And you guys have done some really great stuff, especially with the Experience Waterloo launch. Got some great tumblers, great pint glasses and things like that. But this gives an additional opportunity for downtown businesses to create merchandise that people might want to buy. I talked a little bit about the banners. This kind of shows you what that system could look like. Oftentimes, banners are dramatically over-designed. Designers start with a blank white screen, and they design something that they feel looks balanced and appropriate in that white screen. And then the moment it gets put out into the busyness of the place, it ends up creating a little bit more clutter than it does continuity. The thing that you want to do here is you want to have banners that help people understand what downtown is and where it goes. So, I love the idea of every single bridge having the same color. So as you look, you've got this kind of visual connection point through the bridges. All of Fourth having one color running up and down it. Maybe seeing, banners going perpendicular, carrying you out to TechWorks or things like that. So it's completely up to you to figure out that strategy, but being able to have something that makes sense and that helps people to visually see. And the tendency is you see these banners and people automatically say, oh, okay, so we just rotate the colors on every one. Well, that creates clutter and movement. You want to create repetition. So, you have these kind of solid color usage, and that does seem to work pretty well for us. The other thing that I wanted to say, typically in this section, I would show examples of wayfinding signage. The community has rolled out some wayfinding signage. From a sign design standpoint, from kind of the constructs of the actual navigation system, they're good. I've heard some comments about how maybe some of the placement of them was either too close to the street or too low. And when a wayfinding sign and a snowplow have a conversation, the snowplow always wins. Um, One of the biggest things that I do think could be considered is the backside of those currently have a design that is, um, it's the best way to say it. I'm going to give a long pause so that you can say it under your breath. I heard hideous. It's it doesn't fit in with anything else. So those particular signs aren't intended to be downtown specific. If I know one of the things that I would have done as experience, Waterloo rolled out their brand, is I probably would have very subtly shown how you could take a vinyl wrap on the backside of those and just kind of introduce your interlocking circle pattern, onto that. Um, think of the backsides of your wayfinding signage as a canvas. Okay, it can either be a canvas for you to introduce reinforcement of your community brand. It can be a canvas to help use color to have people associate different parts of your community. It can be a canvas for you to introduce healthy walking trail information on, history that happened there. Right now, they're not really performing very much function, and the overall graphic package on the backside of them doesn't really contribute to any existing brand system. So that's a huge opportunity for you moving forward. Does that make sense? Okay. Um, just showing on the front of this building how kind of adoption here, and again, I, I went back and forth on should this say downtown Waterloo or should this say Main Street Waterloo. There's no place in downtown that actual street banners need to say Main Street Waterloo. That's not the place to market the organization. I went ahead and landed on downtown Waterloo just to be able to kind of position the office as being the primary cheerleader for downtown. It could be argued that these should say Main Street instead, but it's one of those things where it's like once we get to that point, Jess and I can figure it out. But being able to have something that reinforces that on the sidewalk side is kind of a nice addition. Something else I wanted to throw out to you guys is a program that I'm calling Vibrant Waterloo. This is a very, very simple concept that is really gathering a lot of steam across America. It's the idea of what we call vibrancy grants, very small grants to help foster any kind of color or life into the public spaces downtown. You have an interesting dynamic in downtown where there's no real consistency as to where businesses put outdoor seating. Sometimes outdoor seating is on the building side, sometimes it's on the parking side. And, that's a little interesting. A lot of the ones on over here seem to be kind of butted up to the building. Typically, we see that you preserve the walkway on the building side and you allow the servers to kind of pass through that kind of pedestrian thoroughfare. But with these vibrancy grants, you can see all kinds of really great things, whether it's simply colored seating. For the longest time, every time we would put a chair in a downtown, we had to figure out how we could bolt every leg to the sidewalk. The mindset on that has really changed. There's definitely a mindset now where, hey, giving people the opportunity to put seating where they decide seating is needed actually has some real validity. And honestly, if they need a chair so bad, they can take the chair. Um, Invariably, somebody will say we can't do that, or they'll throw the chairs in the river. Um, that's a pretty desperate act. But being able to start in the places where it kind of makes sense, you could imagine seeing colored chairs like this as we go through the Lincoln Park renovations. And it's kind of cool to see, like, every morning these chairs might end up in a different formation based off how they were used the day before. So being able to look at things like that goes a long way. Taking advantage of narrow spaces. This is up in Michigan, in a sidewalk that everybody said was far too narrow for outdoor dining, but they figured out a way to make that work. We see umbrella canopies all the time. We see public art, music. People like to make sounds. They like to beat on things. They love to play games. We're seeing We're seeing, you know, what they call horizontal murals, taking advantage of art and making its way into spaces everywhere. Um, cornhole, bocce, giant Jenga, checkers, anything at all that kind of makes the district stickier, gives people the opportunity to spend a little bit more time there. All of those are always good. And a really great case example is Norfolk, Virginia, and they actually have the website vibrantspaces.com. You can kind of see what the constructs of a vibrancy grant looks like. In addition to that, I like to show what marketing might look like. So I designed just a couple of ad compositions. You can see once you have those circles, it creates a composition that really helps you to tie everything in together. From a messaging standpoint, the thing that we want people to realize is that downtown is changing right in front of their face. And you're either taking advantage of it and exploring it, or you are missing out. And just like Travel Waterloo understood that we don't want you to travel through, but we want you to experience, downtown is a place of discovery. And you owe it to yourself to make the effort to discover it. So being able to kind of highlight and show off some of the things that people might not have seen, being able to kind of show them angles and different perspectives, I think it goes a long way for what we're shooting for. So with that, it carries us to the next steps. Through this package, the organization is actually going to get a comprehensive brand style guide. It will tell them how to use this, how not to break it, define all the colors, define all the typefaces, even talk a little bit about the 5 different file formats that they'll get for all their logo files and everything. And that will all be delivered in a digital package that is intended for them to then turn around and share with the business community. We also created a comprehensive brand launch strategy. It's a checklist for all of the different things that the organization might need to think about as they're rolling this out over the next couple of years. There is no fixed order. Every community is different, but these are the things that you need to think about as you do it. We've also created a how to be a brand partner page. So this allows other event organizers that are doing events in downtown, as well as businesses that exist in downtown, just gives them some ideas of how they might be able to take advantage of this downtown brand and make it work for the community. And then finally, we'll include a brand score sheet. This is something that every year or so, the Main Street organization can go through, self-score themselves, and see where they might spend a little bit of their effort to increase their implementation and their reach. Does that make sense? All right, that's what I was able to do since yesterday. So now it's your turn. What are your thoughts? Does it make sense? Does the direction? I mean, to a certain degree, I hope you can kind of understand the challenge of navigating through the pre-existing brands, the pre-existing colors, the investments that have been made, being very sensitive to all those things. You have to acknowledge that this system does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in concert with many other messages and many other voices that are out there. So I really tried to pay a lot of mind and a lot of attention to how can we create something that can truly be Main Streets while still being a very positive partner with the other organizations.
Yep.
Species. All right. Any questions?